Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here and welcome to the 2023 Women United Education event. This is an annual event. We are so proud of it. My name is Anna Pachias and I'm the current chair of the steering committee for Women United 2023. I've been a longtime member and it's an honor to be here this morning with you. Women United in Philanthropy was founded in 2005, as many of you know, in partnership with the United Way of Greater Charlottesville. One of the founding goals of Women United is to foster women's philanthropy through collective giving, and specifically to human services organizations who serve women and children in our community. Since 2005, we have given away in grants $722,000 to local nonprofits. Yes. And that is thanks to the combined generosity of our underwriters, our corporate sponsors, and individual members like you. Today, I'd like to recognize our underwriters and corporate sponsors whose generous support makes events like these possible and allows us to offer them free and open to the public. Our 2023 underwriters are Carter Myers Automotive, UVA Credit Union, and the Tax Ladies. Let's all clap for them. Our corporate sponsors, this is a long list, are Arkwise Wealth, Bragg's Body Shop, The Closet Factory, Hansman Weeble, Jones & Company CPA, Lewis Law Offices, May Family Foundation, MH Swanson and Petrichor Wealth, Partnerships for Strategic Impact, Pepsi-Cola Bottling Company of Central Virginia, Real Estate 3 Commercial Properties, Rosewood Village, Storyhouse Real Estate, and Wilkinson Wealth Management. How about a round of applause for that? Thanks, guys. Another founding principle of Women United is that we offer our members opportunities to learn about current human service needs in our region through education events like this. So our goal today is to learn and become better informed about the very timely topic of children's safety in our community. On your seats, you will find index cards. Please consider submitting a question that you'd like answered by our panelists during the Q&A at the end of the program. The cards will be collected in about 30 minutes and given to our moderator. And now it's my pleasure to introduce you to our wonderful moderator, Alicia Lenahan, a longtime member of Women United in Philanthropy, who's also serving on the Programs and Events Committee. Thank you, Alicia, and thank you to all of you for being here today.
Good morning, everyone. I'll add my welcome to Anna's. She said my name is Alicia Lenahan. I'm the Executive Director of Common Ground Healing Arts, which happens to be just down the hall. It was a long walk for me this morning, and have been on the Program and Events Committee for some time. And I have to say that this is my favorite event. We have always appreciated the opportunity to start conversations about timely and important matters, and I think everyone here will agree that safety is not only timely and important, it's urgent. So thank you for being here this morning. We'll have the chance to listen and learn from our subject matter experts. And again, if you have a question, please write them on index cards that have been provided, and a volunteer will get to as many as you possibly can at the end of the program. So I'd like you to join me in welcoming our panel, just briefly. Kate Lambert from Boys and Girls Club, Sarah Robinson from Region 10, Jody Murphy from Charlottesville City Schools, and Katrina Carlson from Albemarle County School Board. I'm hoping that Mary Coleman from City of Promise will materialize behind me any second now, but I understand there's traffic on 250 and a whole host of other things that can get between people when they're trying to get from point A to point B. So, thank you again for being here. And at this point, I'm going to invite each of the panelists to share a little bit more information about themselves, the roles they play in their organizations, and why this topic is important to them personally and professionally. Jody, can I start with you?
Good morning. Thank you so much for inviting me here. I have the privilege to work with Charlottesville City Schools as the mental wellness coordinator for the division. Each and every day, I get to work with an amazing team of mental health professionals that serve the students and families of our division. So we are really lucky. We added 11 mental health professionals to our already, I would say it's never enough. We never have enough mental health professionals in a school division, but we probably have more mental health professionals than other divisions. So each of our schools have at least two mental health professionals, a school counselor in each elementary, and either a social worker or a social emotional support counselor. We are uniquely positioned that we have an upper elementary school, which is unlike most school divisions, so a 5-6 building, and we have a middle school that is a 7-8 building. We will not have those two buildings, hopefully, and I mean that lovingly, but we will collapse into a true middle school. And then we have a high school where we have a clinical social worker, social emotional support counselor. We have a team of school counselors. So we have a lot of support, but what I'll share is, given what this year has looked like with community violence, the pandemic, which is, I guess, officially over, but I think you all know that it has been very difficult. There's a rise in mental health concerns and struggles. There's never enough of us. So I have the privilege of providing clinical support and supervision to this team of amazing people. I work alongside our equity supervisor and our family engagement coordinator, who are amazing supports and in the audience. And so I get to do a lot of amazing work, and it's humbling and it's hard, but I would not do anything else. I came from a background in social services and juvenile justice, and I chose to move to the schools, and I was lucky enough to get a position where I started in social work because I wanted to do more prevention. And I realized, what I'll share is that I grew up with two parents who were school teachers. And I'm sure, like most of you, I said I will never, ever in my whole life work in a school. If you read my bio, you'll see I live in an intergenerational home. My parents live with me. One of my parents needs a lot of medical support. But I told them when I was growing up, I will never in my whole life do what you do. And I'm not a teacher, and I could not be a teacher. I give teachers a lot of credit for what they do. But when I graduated from undergrad with my bachelor's in social work, I said, I'm never going to work in a school. I will not do that. And I got my master's in social work, and I said, I'm never going to work in a school. And my parents kept saying, okay, and they would never push me. And after about 10 years in the social work field, doing things that I loved, I said, I need to do more prevention work. Bringing kids into foster care, which occasionally there's a place for that, but I don't necessarily believe in that. I said, okay, I need to figure out something different. I did community-based social work, but I wanted to get where more kids were. Where can I reach more families? Where can I get ahead of it? And that's how I landed in school. And so day in and day out, I get to hear from my parents, oh, that's so funny, you go to school every day. And that's how I landed in schools, and I love it.
Hi, I'm so glad to be here, and thank you to Women United for hosting this. Okay, can you hear me? Can you hear me now? Okay, is it better? I'm Kate Lambert. I'm the CEO of the Boys and Girls Clubs of Central Virginia. Although I've only been in this position for a couple of months, I started in November, I've been at the organization for 11 years. And I really care about this issue because we are seeing kids coming into our clubs every day, and parents for that matter, who have experienced trauma and are experiencing trauma. I care about this issue because the parents and caregivers of 650 kids a day are entrusting the care of their children to our organization. That number is soon to increase to 850 kids a day when we open our new club in April. I care about this issue because safety has to be our #1 priority. That's physical safety, social and emotional safety, and cyber safety. Our kids have to be our number one priority. I care because the social and emotional gaps that existed for our kids prior to the pandemic have only widened and have been exacerbated by the recent incidences of violence and gun violence in our community. I care about this issue because every child deserves the opportunity to succeed and to feel safe. We are working with the future leaders of our community. We need them to be well. We need them to feel safe so that they can be productive, responsible, and caring citizens of our community. Sarah?
Good morning. Can you hear me okay? Yeah. All right, good morning. So I am Sarah Robinson. Closer? How's that? How close? So close. This was very intimate. Good morning, I'm Sarah Robinson. I'm a licensed professional counselor, and I am the director of the Child and Family Outpatient and Crisis Teams at Region 10. And I've been at, I've been at Region 10 for 15 years now in a variety of roles, and I think I'm talking about and thinking about safety of our children more than I ever have before. And there seems to be an increase in our knowledge around the importance of safety for children. And one of the reasons I believe that and why we're thinking about this so much is because we really have learned so much about how our brains work. And we understand that our brains cannot learn if we're not safe or experiencing connection. So you'll hear many of us say this over and over again. You can't learn if you're not first safe and connected. And so thinking about safety is so important when we think about our children, because what do we want for them is to learn. And they don't have access to that. Their brains don't have the capacity to do that. They do not have the foundation of safety and connection. And so I talk about that all the time in my work. And this is also really important to me because I live in the city of Charlottesville and I have children who attend city schools. And so I'm also thinking about them and their peers and the community that they're experiencing. And that to me means we as a community need to show up and take care of these children. And I know many of the folks on this panel have heard me say this so many times before, but I really think if we want to take care of kids, we need to do a better job of taking care of our caregivers, our parents, and our teachers, and all of the individuals that support our children. I think that they have what they need, the kids are going to be okay. And I don't think we've seen that in recent years. And we will talk about, as we go through this program today, we'll talk about the mental health crisis that our youth are experiencing. Certainly the pandemic exacerbated that, but it didn't start that. We've seen mental health on the decline for youth for years, and the past 3 years have been particularly hard. I think the same is true for caregivers. So I hope that we'll be talking about our children's safety, but in the context of what does our community's wellness look like as well, and what does our community's resilience look like.
Katrina? Is this close enough? Yes. Thank you for having me. It feels kind of humbling being up here because I know so many of you through your work in the community, and honestly, probably many of you could be up here on the panel giving information about the work that you do and how you keep children in our community safe. I'd also like to note that all of you guys would be my buddies at law school because I sit at the front row is absent. Everyone's pushing towards the back, so I appreciate that, except for you, Leah. You're staying bold. My name is Katrina Carlson. I am chair of the Albemarle County School Board. I'm also deputy city attorney for Charlottesville, where my primary responsibility is representing the Department of Social Services. So those are children that are interacting with our system
through foster care, through a CHIMS, a child in need of services, child in need of supervision. So just seeing the children that are really struggling and that have come to court intervention. I think it's interesting that you mentioned caregivers. I think they're often lost in the conversation. And when people hear that I work with abused and neglected children, did y'all read that book, A Child Called It? They often think of that, A Child Called It. That's not what it is. 95% of our cases are not abuse, it's neglect, and the neglect is from parents that are struggling themselves. They love their children, they do not have the resources that they need to provide a safe and stable home for their children. And this is something that this work, what drives me to do this work, I was a teacher with Teach for America, I did child advocacy while I was at law school, that's what brought me to law school, focusing on children as a CASA volunteer. What drives me to this work is that both my parents dropped out of high school. They got pregnant as teenagers. They were interracial couple in Virginia. They were not welcome in school. They left, and I saw the struggles that they had, that our family had as I grew up. We relied on food stamps, welfare. We had intervention with the Department of Social Services. I know how important these services are to create better outcomes for children. I ended up going to Yale. My brothers did well. We did well. And so when I talk about student safety, for me, a big component of it, I know that's maybe a broader thing, but is creating opportunities for our children to succeed so that they have better outcomes and they are not trapped in a cycle that keeps them down. And so that's what motivates me. That's what I'm hoping that we can get to, and I'm happy to discuss both my roles with these wonderful ladies. So thank you.
So I neglected to tell you that this presentation is going to last until 3 o'clock this afternoon. So please continue to help yourself to the wonderful food provided by Pearl. This is an important conversation, and honestly, it could take not only all of today, but many days to come. So we're going to try to get in as much as we possibly can. While we were planning this program, Wall shared a lot of important information that included increased reports of anxiety and depression, and long wait lists for people seeking help, and of course, safety. We are living in a fragile community nested in a complicated world. So the question is, what is keeping you up at night? So Sarah, if I can, I'd like to start with you, because as you mentioned earlier, you are aware of national and statewide data that helps define the mental health crisis writ large. And as program director for Region 10, you are seeing local trends. So I'm going to hand it off to you.
Yeah, I think it is timely that last month, the CDC released a report on youth mental health and found the rates of sadness and hopelessness in teen girls was at 57%. And that number is tremendous when we think about how teens are experiencing the world and their life. We also know that percentage went up 20% in 10 years. So we have to be thinking about, again, what's happening in the world that is changing this sense of safety and connection for youth. To continue with those statistics, 30% of youth have reported they considered suicide in 2021. It's a tremendous data, piece of data. And 18% of teen girls reported they had experienced sexual violence in that year. And for our LGBTQ plus youth, 1 in 5 reported that they had attempted suicide. Not considered it, but attempted it. And so I start to think about our vulnerable populations. I start to think about what has occurred that may have raised those limits or those data points. And I'm really thinking about locally, I will say statewide, our data is in line with that. That's national data. Statewide, that our data is in line with that. We don't have local data in the same way, and it would be really, really helpful if we did. But I will say, from what we have seen in our clinic, from our referral sources, in the community and anecdotally, we're seeing the same trend. If I was to just think about the kids who are waiting for services at Region 10 or trying to access services and how quickly we can get them in, it's fascinating to see the groups of kids who are experiencing increased anxiety and depression. One of the groups I'm really seeing are my 14 and 15-year-olds, the ones who weren't in middle school during the pandemic. I start to think about what do they miss? What do they lack? What did they lack during that time? That now they're struggling in the way that they are. But the data also suggests that we need to be screening for anxiety in kids as young as 8. I would argue maybe earlier than that. And so it's not just our teens that are struggling with this. We're certainly seeing more schools making referrals, more parents seeking services, and then them struggling to find those services in this community that is in many ways resource rich. And yet, within our private practices and our organizations and agencies that offer these services, there are long wait times for services like outpatient services. But then we can think about our crisis services and our emergency services, start to look at what's happening to kids when they're not safe and need to go to a hospital, and we start to see the system is falling apart. It truly is. In many ways, our systems are not able to care for the level of acuity and the amount of children that need mental health care. So that's certainly keeping me up at night, is how do we get the kids into the care that they need at the dose that they need it? And what does that look like? How do we bring parents into that? How do we support them as well? How do we make sure that kids can access the resources that they need? And I'm so grateful that you caught up the idea of resources and access to those resources. Because we are seeing there are inequities within our systems, where there are populations and groups of kids who just aren't able to get the mental health services that they need.
Jody, if I can bring it down from the national statewide, and Region 10 has a fairly large footprint now down to Charlottesville City Schools, and what is that community experiencing this year?
Sure. So I think we are seeing exactly what Sarah just shared on a much smaller scale within our school system. We see the rates that Sarah talked about within our system, meaning that schools are responsible for something called threat assessment, and we are responsible for collecting data, and that matches what Sarah talked about, meaning if a student threatens to harm themselves or harm somebody else, we have to assess for that threat. And when I look at the rates of threat assessment that we are doing this year, even compared to last year, those numbers, we are already past, well beyond the number that we did last year. So last year we did 180 for the entire school year, K-12. We are already at 270 as of yesterday. And so when you think about just where we are, thinking about how kids are feeling about themselves, right? Behavior is communication. So I really talk to our mental health clinicians and our teachers and our administrators about not all threats are created equally. Just think about things that you have said when you are upset or frustrated, or when your prefrontal cortex is offline. I certainly have said things in a moment of frustration. I am raising 2 teenagers. I walked away and said something to my husband that I thought, well, thankfully my child did not hear me say that I am not going to actually do. But when kids are communicating their frustration and it's coming out as threats, we have a responsibility to say, hey, what's going on? How are you really feeling? Let's talk about this. But there have been a number of threats this year where kids are talking about harming themselves, where that is really how they're feeling. That is, they feel desperate. When Sarah talks about the hopelessness, the sadness, the levels of anxiety, we have not seen those rates of depression and anxiety
at the rate that we are seeing them ever before. And there was a mental health crisis in teens before the pandemic, but it was certainly exacerbated when we returned. And Sarah talked about it's not just our teens. We are seeing it in elementary school. We are seeing it in 5th and 6th graders. When I look at the ages of our threat assessment, it is not 15 and up only. We are seeing it in our little ones. And so we need to do a better job as a community talking to our kids and our parents and our caretakers around what's really going on and how do we better help and how do we get services in place. And there is a resource gap. The waiting lists are very long. We had a large influx of families coming from other countries, whether it was refugee or immigrant. And so not all families are able to access resources in the language that they speak, which creates a huge barrier and an inequity. But we have families that are on waiting lists for months and months and not able to get services. I also think the level of community violence this year has not been a level of violence I have experienced as long as I've been in this community. And so it is a layer upon layer of trauma that our families and kids are experiencing that we have, like, it is just coming at us all the time. So trying to help kids and families and our staff. Sarah and I have talked a lot this year around how do we help better take care of our grown-ups so they can better care for our kids and our families. We also have more kids and families in unstable housing situations. I looked at our numbers just yesterday. We have more than 2 times the number of families in unstable housing situations this year identified than we did last year. And for me, I try to see both a positive as far as identification goes. I just want to be clear, it's never positive to have more families that identified. But what I will say is when we think about safety and connection, I do think it speaks to families feel more connected to be talking to us about these are the circumstances with which we are currently living in. And it does allow us to better help when we know what's going on. So there are some resources that we have available to better support when we know what's happening. But the sheer number of kids and families that we have who are either homeless, we have families who have slept in cars, we have families who don't know where kids say, I don't know where I'm going to sleep tonight. And so we're talking about, when Sarah talks about, we're asking kids to learn. They're not going to learn that day, or maybe the next day, or for whatever period of time when they don't know where they're sleeping. Basic needs are not being met. There's like access to clean clothes, food insecurity. So there's just bottom line basic needs. We have a number of kids and families who are struggling with that situation on a daily basis. And then also just the announcements coming in about SNAP was being cut because I don't really have a good answer for that, right? That, what we're seeing in the school system around basic needs and then SNAP, because the emergency SNAP, that messaging to families and kids are things are better. You don't need this. And that is definitely not what we see going on right now. And then, the number of lockdowns and swatting that happened at the beginning of the school year for city schools, the hoax calls, was very stressful and traumatic for a number of people. And sometimes now we have a stay tuned, stay put because there's a medical emergency, but it still brings back the feelings of being scared and worried. And that really does speak to, for many people, a lack of safety when you're in a school building. So we have a lot going on that has impacted us at school this year.
Thank you. Okay, so faced with challenges that Sarah and Jody have shared, the next question is, how is your organization responding today? So Kate, you have a multi-layered view because you have a larger Girls Club population, but you also can drill down to the names and faces of the kids and families who walk through the doors of the clubhouses on a daily basis. So how are the clubs responding in this environment?
Yeah, I think, none of us can address these issues alone. I think the role the club plays in this process is providing a safe and positive place for kids to be when they're not at school and when they're not at home. We need to be a reliable resource for families so that they can go to work and live their lives and earn livings to support their families. So we offer year-round youth development programs in 6 clubs across Central Virginia. We have 6 club sites that serve kids ages 5 to 18 every day after school, all day during the summer. We're an affordable resource for families at a cost of $35 or less per year per child. Our programs promote academic success, healthy lifestyles, and good character and citizenship, but I think fundamental to everything that we do at the club are building relationships of trust between caring adults and our club members who come to us every day. 97% of the kids who come to the club tell us that the reason they come back to the club is because they know there's an adult there who they know cares about them. So that is essential to everything that we do, no matter what program we're running, no matter what's happening in the club. Those relationships are critical to building the emotional wellness of our youth. It's very important too that kids are having fun. That is an important role that the club plays in supporting the good work of our schools, in supporting parents in their home life. Kids are wired to play, right? They're wired to play. So whether it's structured play, unstructured play, free play, whether it's indoors or outdoors, this is probably the area where our clubs can serve our community the best and make the biggest difference. Play makes kids feel resilient. It gives them a voice in how they interact with their environment. It helps them build self-expression, self-discovery. This is really important. Letting kids do what they do best builds trust and makes them feel safe in the spaces they're in. It also gives our staff the opportunity to listen. Those are times when kids are talking, right? Kids are freely talking about what's going on in their lives, what troubles them. Those are important moments in our clubs. We have many, many partners who help us do this work. We don't do it alone. Our good partners at the public schools help us, and create sort of these continuous systems of care for our children. Also, dozens of community partners throughout the community who provide enrichment programs for our kids in STEM, arts, career and college and career readiness, chess clubs, you name it. We have partners that come in and do these enrichment programs with our kids. Again, it's about building those relationships of trust between adults and kids. It's about listening to what is troubling kids and being trained to address those and have conversations with kids and be active listeners. With our partners, we're committed to being part of this system of continuous care for young people and their families. Family engagement is an important part of what we do. As you've heard from our panelists, so many are financially and emotionally stressed. Maybe they can't feed their families, maybe they have other things going on in their lives, but we're here to be part of that continuous system of care. We have a lot of work to do, and we're happy to be a part of this conversation.
Okay. Katrina, you sit in a unique position, actually, two unique positions that give you a very specific view of individual kids and families when you're on the child welfare side of the equation. But as you sit on the school board, you get the long view. So starting there, in this climate, has the school board considered policies, procedures, looking forward to try and adjust as we travel this journey together?
Yes. Short and some of it. We are trying to be responsive to it. What is a changing landscape? Although many of these problems existed beforehand, they certainly have been exacerbated. I think there was a front page article in the Daily Progress today saying that our children are increasingly at risk. 20% increase in deaths over the last 3 years. It's the largest jump we've seen in 50 years. And mental, I'm just going to say that the second vehicle vehicle deaths is the number one issue that's stayed about static. It's gun deaths that have gone up the most. And that's both suicides and violent deaths, which are two things that we've heard mentioned here. And the schools are trying to address that in a multitude of ways. We're providing mental health first aid training for our teachers and anyone who's interacting with kids. That's a program that literally helps you identify if someone's in crisis. Like, what are the signs and when do you need to interject yourself into a child's life to make sure that they are safe that day? We're doing culturally responsive teaching, curriculum changes, ways that our teachers interact with students to help them have better impact and hopefully connect with their students better. To Kate's point, giving kids enrichment opportunities. I'm really proud of a program we have at Albemarle High School where we have started. Sports can be a great outlet for children in many ways. Helps their mental health, helps them have connection, helps them have engagement. If a child is in school, that's a positive generator. If a child is in school, enjoying themselves, engaged, wanting to do it, even if it's not math class, but they're doing the math class so that they can get to the sport. But we have a limit in how many kids we can do that for. So Sarah Bond at Albemarle High School, when they did the first round of cuts about who made the varsity team. Then they put people on the JV. There was still 100 kids that have tried out that don't have access to a sport. So we started an intramural program. That's something that we can do to make sure that our children have activities that they're doing. You guys have given such wonderful responses, and it's hard. It's great. It's good to know that we're all experiencing the same thing so that we know what problem that we're focused on. The threat assessments, I just want to say it since we're here. We have seen an increase in threat assessments. I was on the disciplinary committee for a year. I had to often deal with children that had risen up in the threat level. One of the questions on those threat assessments is, does your child have access to a gun? And you'd be surprised how many people don't know the answer to that. And that is something that we can actively do in our community. You can do it even just talking to people, my dad has guns. Talking to my dad, just how do you make sure that if you have had a gun, you know where it's stored, you know that it's stored safely, and you know that a child does not have access to it. So I know I just jumped through a whole bunch of things, but yes, we are doing specific policies. Another one is restorative justice. We absolutely are seeing interactions in the community that stressed children are experiencing are coming through our doors. So restorative justice is work that we can do in our school. We have a policy in place to allow children to, I don't know how many of you all are familiar with restorative justice, but it allows children to resolve conflicts in a way together that hopefully leads to a better outcome in the long run versus ignoring it in school and seeing what happens when they're outside of school doors. So it's kind of pushing our school efforts out into a child's life in their day-to-day life. I hope that does, I jumped through so many things. I hope that's a good enough answer. I'm happy to answer more questions afterwards.
Well, as I said earlier, you could stay here for the remainder of the day easily. So you all bring a wealth of professional experience to the table, and your organizations are equally well positioned. So giving all that you know from past experience, giving all that you know today, what strategies and approaches, in addition to the ones that are happening, are you planning looking forward? And this is perhaps the most important question, and you've all touched on it a little bit. What can we, I say we, the people in this room, these people know, what can we do to support our kids, our families, and our community? What can we do to support you? Okay, Simon goes first.
All right, I'll do that. So summing up all of our knowledge. Okay. I guess I would say, if I'm speaking from perspective of Region 10 and what we are doing and how that might be reflected in the community, we're looking at a couple things. We're looking at partnerships. Where do we partner with other members of our community or organizations to make our impact more powerful? So Region 10 has prevention workers that are in many of the schools in the city and the county. There's a called student assistance specialists. We are doing lots and lots of trainings because we think the more people who have knowledge about mental health, about trauma, about resilience, the more we're going to be able to identify and support the individuals who may be struggling with that. We are doing partnerships through coalitions. So our community is lucky to have multiple coalitions. I will mention a few here. There's the Community Mental Health and Wellness Coalition that is really working on things like addressing our opioid epidemic. We're talking about caregivers and also young people. We haven't mentioned substance abuse, and we're definitely seeing locally an increase in substances as well. There are also,
Can I just
Yes,
hop on and say,
please,
that
John.
was the third biggest, that's the biggest jump that's creating
Yes.
an increase in deaths of children as of substance abuse.
absolutely. So the Mental Health Wellness Coalition working on those things, addressing the issues of racial inequity within our community and how that drives health and behavioral problems in the course of the lifespan. We understand that if we don't address racial inequities, we're not going to be able to support the community and the youth in this community in having access to the healthcare that they need. There is a coalition called SPARK, and that is a suicide prevention coalition. One of the things I wanted to piggyback on what you were saying, when we're talking about gun violence, we know one of the most effective ways to address suicide and to engage in suicide prevention is restricting means to access. So Region 10 has, we have gun locks that we can give out for free. We have lock boxes for medications, guns, knives, any of the things that may need to be locked up or restricted, and those are all free, and we're able to give those out. We also participate in the Trauma-Informed Community Network, really looking to say, well, how do we help this community understand the impact of trauma on our brains and our bodies, but also what do we do about it? How do we grow resilience? Resilience is the antidote. So how do we grow resilience in our community and our youth as well? And there is also KM. I'm having a hard time. There's a coalition that's really based around youth and how do we bring together our youth serving organizations. So coalitions are a big part of that. And so when I think about what can you do, I'm really thinking about, well, how do you get involved with the folks that are already doing a lot of this work to support that work, but also to bridge that work with other individuals, other resources. And when we think about resilience, I think about them in some buckets. The first one is relationships. We are more resilient when we are in relationships. Kids need lots and lots of healthy relationships with peers, with adults. So I would ask, who are the kids in your lives? How many more kids could you bring into your sphere in a way that you can be a safe and predictable and connecting relationship? But I'm also thinking about, well, in those relationships, that's when kids can learn the skills that they need. Remember, we can't learn if we're not safe and connected. So kids need those relationships to then learn skills of resilience for themselves. Things like how to problem solve, how to cope with stress, how to make good decisions, right? And then the third piece of that is, what resources do we as a community have access to? And I will end with just saying, I don't know if any of you know John Kabat-Zinn, know of John, you know him personally. He's the mindfulness guru. And one thing that he always says about resilience, he has this saying where he says, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Okay, to me, that's about those first couple buckets. In relationships, can we learn the skills to get through adversity? How do we get through the hard stuff that's inevitably going to happen? But there's a researcher on resilience named Michael Unger, and he says his research tells us it's a lot easier to learn to surf if you have a surfboard, a coach, and a lifeguard. And so I would really say, if we want to support our kids, how are we showing up for them? How are we able to be there in relationship so they can learn what they need and have access to the resources they need to do well.
So if you have something to add, please do, or we can go on to very meaty questions that the audience has. Kate, do you want to?
Well, I was just going to say, in terms of how we address these needs in a very practical way, serving more kids is something that our organization is looking at. I mentioned earlier that we're opening a new club in just a few weeks, a 52,000 square foot Boys and Girls Club on the most densely populated campus in Albemarle County in partnership with our Albemarle County Public Schools. This is a huge initiative that's been going on for 10 years. James Pierce, our former CEO, is sitting in the back, and he had a lot to do with pushing this project forward. And we'll be serving an additional 200 kids a day in an area of long known unmet need. So that's one way we're addressing this issue. In addition to staff training, making sure our staff are getting opportunities for trauma-informed care, expanding teen programs to meet teens where they are on weekends and evenings. We hear a lot from families, our kids don't have enough to do, so we want to do that. We want to continue to make learning fun for our kids, and I'll end by saying that we're stronger together, and I think that the ways you can support is by being an active learner about the issues that are going on, like attending events like this, being a great advocate, being a volunteer, and supporting those organizations that are doing this work.
I would just add some of the things that we're doing. We are really listening to our students' voices. We know they have a lot to say, and we want to listen to what they want to share with us and try to make things be different for them by hearing them and then implementing the things that they want that we can do, right? Like, we know sometimes teens want, like, hey, we don't want to take math anymore, so could you just cut that out, right? Like, that's not a possibility, but doing the things that are possible. There's a new, I think it was actually in the news yesterday, it's called Elevate. And there's a meeting today where they will be listening, like elevating their voices, and it will be monthly. But I also would just say, we know that the community has feedback for us, and we want to hear what you have to say. I would also share, right, like, I get calls a lot. I know lots of our coordinators do, and our school board does, and our superintendent, and we want to hear that feedback, and teachers get feedback. I would just share it. We want to have conversations. We want to hear what it is that parents and community members want to say. I'm always willing to engage in those conversations. It is definitely easier to have difficult conversations when people are willing to have them versus when people are yelling at us, because it is hard to hear when people are yelling. I'm willing to get yelled at, I'll be honest, because I just want to hear what it is. We want things to be better. We want things to be different. And we want our kids and families to be served well. And so engaging in the hard conversations is what we know needs to happen to serve our kids and our families and community. And I think, echoing what Sarah and Kate said, being in partnership, working together towards the common goal of educating our kids, all of our kids, in an equitable way, and moving us forward.
I was just going to say, I'm ready. You guys have done a wonderful job. I'm ready for the questions.
Okay. We've all touched on this lightly, but we'll start with this. As a parent of older teens, I see how negative and influenced social media, TikTok, and YouTube are on people of all ages, but especially children. How responsible do you feel these platforms are for the decline in mental health?
I guess I will jump in real quick, although you ladies might be able to speak more knowledgeably about this. I can tell you, when I was a teacher, which was a long time ago, 10 years ago, or more than that, 15 years ago, that was right when we were starting to see the rise of Facebook, which recently I told someone to friend me on Facebook, a younger person, and they literally laughed. They're like, what is Facebook? But Facebook was a thing then, and I remember we used to, as a teacher, you could see these children were fighting with each other, or calling each other names, or bullying each other, and there was very little guidance about what to do as a teacher when those children were then in your classroom. So it absolutely was a problem, and I didn't have a good answer back then. I can't tell you on the school board level, actually, I won't take credit for it. It's a federal decision that TikTok is no longer allowed to be accessed on federal internet. So that's going to be, and that was adopted also by Virginia, because we rely on federal funding. And so school districts, Albemarle will not be allowing TikTok to be accessed using the school internet. However, it doesn't really prevent it from going on. And I would love to hear your responses to this, because I absolutely do believe it is causing part of the increase. I've seen it when we've done those threat assessments and when we've talked to children about what's going on. It almost always involves some form of communication that occurred outside of school or in school on a social media platform. It just spreads so easily.
I'll jump in. Absolutely, social media has contributed to the decline in mental health and wellness for youth. That said, I do not believe social media is inherently bad. I think it is nuanced. I think it also gives lots of kids opportunity to learn more about the world and the issues that we are facing, and maybe that contributes to a decline as well, because we're facing so many challenging issues within the world, and the world is an unkind place right now. So I can see in many ways there are benefits and there is a cost to social media. You may find your community on social media that you don't have access to within, let's say, your school or your community at large. And that might be the only place you feel connected and safe and free to explore your identity. In those ways, social media can be life-saving to some. In other ways, social media are spaces our children go where they are unsupervised. And in unsupervised spaces, our kids are vulnerable. They're vulnerable to bullying, to predators. They are vulnerable to their own behavior that may not align with their values, and they are unsupervised spaces. And for those reasons, I do think there's been a significant decline in health and wellness for kids, because they've had to navigate without the supportive relationship of an adult who's helping them to manage the skills that they might need to get through those situations, those challenging situations online. And those can be spaces where kids lose esteem, lose connection, lose their safety. And when I talk about safety, I'm talking about social safety. And a lack of social safety impacts your brain in the exact same way as if you were physically unsafe. Your body responds with the same stress hormones, and it can literally change how your brain gets wired. And so, do I have a great solution? I'm a parent of children. We're all navigating that. But I tend to say, it's not a one-size-fits-all strategy when it comes to social media, because there are both the benefits and the cost of that. And here's the deal. I also tell parents this all the time. If you're expecting to parent your children the way that you were parented, you're going to find that's not very successful. And that stinks for most of us. It's like, so we're reinventing parenting? Yeah, we really are reinventing parenting, because we are parenting kids in a different world than we grew up in. And so we can mourn that and grieve that and move on, because we have got to catch up. So having interest in what your kids are doing and really learning more. I think that comment about engage in learning, listen to what kids are doing, listen to what they're talking about. It can be painful sometimes. Listening to them.
I think the other thing about social media and teens is that once, as a parent, you have figured out the social media platform, they switch to a new one. And Sarah's right. It used to be that you would choose to parent either pretty similarly to how you were parented, or you would say, I'm not going to parent anything like how I was parented, And now we're living in an age where, with social media, that for most of us didn't exist. And so, like I shared, I'm parenting teenagers, and most of the time I'm looking at the phone saying, I don't have any idea what this is. And I'm trying to figure it out. And once I figured it out, one of my teens is saying, I don't use that anymore, with a look on their face that means something not becoming. And now I figured, right? And so I think it is, you're having to constantly weigh out with however many kids you have, how is it impacting your child? And not all kids are the same. And you can have one kid where they have the skills to manage, and it's another kid who is potentially impacting yours. And we also are not necessarily parenting in a world where I can reach out to another parent and say, hey, this message was sent. And sometimes the messages disappear, and sometimes they're back, and so, right? And so you're navigating in a social media world that feels confusing and unfriendly. And frankly, I didn't realize that I needed an advanced degree in social media to parent, but that is the world we're in right now. And it's sometimes, or really always, individual decisions based on what an individual kid might need. And it changes, I think, based on what your child or the child in front of you is sort of giving back. And it's hard around social media with kids. And I think there are some, I would say, right, like Common Sense Media gives some guidelines, and they're not always exactly right for your child, but looking, I would say just around, they give you some helpful blurbs around what the social media platform is. Because sometimes it is like reading another language that that you don't speak. And I work right in a school system where high schoolers or middle schoolers will sometimes point blank tell you, like, oh, you don't want that social media platform, and or like there's a lot of predators on that platform. So sometimes if you ask, kids will tell you very directly what's going on, but they're not one size fits all, and not all kids can handle all social media platforms.
I'm just gonna jump on and say, meeting your kids where they are is important too. I read this article about this mom who went on Roblox. Y'all probably are out of the Roblox, and this is what all the kids are doing. And I read it, I was like, I guess I could join Roblox to connect with my kids. So I'm on Roblox now. You feel free to friend me, but I mean, there's something to be said for, there's some positive points. So if you just figure out where to meet kids where they are, whether it's hopping on the platform with them or encouraging those more positive games or connections or whatever they're into, I think it's worthwhile.
Good, okay. It's hard to. So we're talking about if we take care of the caregivers, that perhaps the kids will be in better shape. So if stressed parents are a source of kids' anxiety and depression, what should we do to help parents?
I think family engagement is really important. I think it's one of the things we've been focusing on at the Boys and Girls Club. I mean, obviously our primary mission is to serve the kids, but nothing's happening in isolation. And we have family engagement nights. We engage our families in the college and career readiness programs that we offer at the club. I think it's vital our staff have regular communication with parents when they come into the club. And I think those interactions and how we engage families is really critical to our success moving forward. I think that's true for all youth serving organizations, really.
Yeah, family engagement, big focus on family engagement. I can say through my work with the Department of Social Services, but we touched upon it, expansion of services. The shortage that we experience with our kids with mental health services with housing, all that is also felt by the families. I'm going to go a little beyond that and say building a sense of community with struggling families. One of the biggest things I've seen in my role is that there are a lot of resources out there, and I feel like we end up targeting the same families. It's really hard to get new people into the fold of the services that our community already has. And so if we're talking with a positive spin, not just what we're missing, what you guys could do in this audience, take make an active decision to include someone who you don't normally talk to or who doesn't normally get reached with events like this, with flyers, with pamphlets. That's something that I personally have made a goal this year, to reach out to people new to me, speak to them, and tell them things that are going on, whether it's inviting them, have coffee with someone that you don't normally have coffee with. I know that sounds perhaps overly optimistic, but it's just something that I feel is missing in our community. As a school board chair, I get probably 7 emails a day advertising some sort of event, activity, thing opportunity that someone in our community could benefit from. And what keeps me up is I don't know how to get these out to people. They get sent to me like I'm going to be able to make it known to the whole community. So maybe that's what I'm doing right now, is saying, you probably all know of 1 or 2 things happening in the community. You go to them, but it really actually takes an active decision to say, let me reach out to someone and make sure that they know this is going on so that they can have access to this service and opportunity and think outside of your regular social circle. Because I think that would help grow some of these movements.
That personal invitation to engage or to participate can make all the difference in the world. Sarah, do you have anything to add for caregivers? Jody?
So, sorry, Sarah.
No, go ahead.
I think about caregivers, not just family members, but also I think about our staff at school. But I think sometimes it's basic things like checking in and really not taking the, like, oh, I'm fine, when you know that somebody's not fine, and taking the time to say, hey, it's been a really hard day, or it's been a hard week. What do you need? And sometimes people know what they need, but they're afraid to say it. Or they don't know what they need, and you need to do a little unpacking with people. We work with a lot of families, and sometimes they know that they need food, or they know that they need help with transportation, or they know they need help making doctor's appointments, and they're just nervous to say that. And so being open and available and saying, like, hey, these are the things we can help you with, but if it's not one of these things, tell me what it is. You never know. I may be able to access that support. Like, I may be able to help you, or I can help connect you to who that is, who can do that. And with staff, really being thoughtful about the team yesterday with City Schools was trained in a debriefing model. There have been a lot of things that have happened this year around. We need to really be thoughtful about debriefing our staff after critical events. And how are we going to do that with kids when there's been either a significant event or things like a lockdown? Are we going to debrief everybody, right? Like, thinking about in general, and maybe parents and families, right? Like, their kids, I think about it, I have kids. When the school goes into lockdown, I'm hiding with a group of kids, and my kids are too. I'm panicked in 2 different ways. Like, how are we going to take care of people and not just let it intermittently, like, hey, are you okay? Right? What are we doing? Things like that, and reaching out. So I think it's both individually really reaching out and thinking about how we care for people, and then more importantly, systematically doing those things. Because then I think when individual things come up, people will know, oh, I'm going to reach out to this group of people and make sure everybody's okay.
I sat too long, now I have a thought. I just wanted to add, I keep talking about the brain. We often talk about things like self-care. Don't come at me with your self-care anymore. And here's why. When we think about stressed brains, you really can't access the part of your brain that allows you to engage in self-care. And when I'm talking about self-care, I'm not talking about like bubble baths and soothing things. That's actually self-soothing. I'm talking about self-care, like eating nutritious food and being able to exercise your body and access your doctor's appointments, maybe go to therapy. That's self-care. When you are under stress and your brain is experiencing threat, because you're not safe or you're disconnected, what you actually need is co-care. We need other people. We need community care. And community care You know, that is the systems. Do you have access to childcare, fair wages, and equitable housing? I feel like I'm on an agenda now. But really, do you have access to community care? I always ask parents questions like, if you have an emergency in the middle of the night, who would show up? And so often families are like, no one. We need people who show up for us when we're under stress to carry a piece of it for us. And so I would love our community to really shift to this a model of co-care, mutual aid, all of the things where you show up for each other, because that is what you need when your brains or your nervous systems are experiencing high stress, is we need other people. And we need access to those relationships and the resources that come with those relationships.
I have a segue, it's a perfect segue, thank you. How do we help children and teens identify and name their feelings and what they need and how to express them safely and in a healthy way?
Now, I think I talked about this a little earlier, but creating those positive relationships with adults is key to that. Making sure kids are having opportunities to have fun, free play, unstructured time, where they can really communicate what they're feeling in a sort of natural way, in a natural environment. Giving kids opportunities to be in the outdoors. When they're distracted and they're having fun, they're not on their phones, right? And so we need to give them opportunities to sort of get out of that pattern. Otherwise, this becomes their world. And so I think field trips, getting kids out in the community, interacting with their community, caring about their community, learning to care about one another. Teaching kids how to talk to one another in positive ways is such an important thing. And that happens because of those relationships of trust. So, and that starts with giving kids opportunities to have fun. So I think that's kind of a good place to start, and that's something the club is really focused on.
I'll say on a division level, it's embedding social emotional learning into our curriculum and putting money where our mouth is, making sure that we have counselors in our schools that are starting that curriculum early. Not when they're not necessarily in the teens still doing that work, but we have counselors in our schools in the elementary level who are coming in and it's just doing actual work. They're talking to students, talking to their feelings, doing work sessions around identifying how you're feeling, identifying a safe, trusted adult in your life who you can go to if you're struggling. So that's just actual work that needs to be done. I'm really proud of Albemarle. I'm sure Charlottesville is doing the same stuff. See Emily. So making sure, although academics are our end goal, they're a necessary goal to make sure that our students have more positive futures, understanding that social emotional learning is a core component of academic learning and success in life and starting it early.
I would just add, give them language. And when you're teaching kids about understanding their internal experience and the internal experiences of other people and how we impact each other, right? That's teaching empathy. We teach it by modeling it. So I would suggest that the adults in our community need to really show up with doing the work themselves, having language for their own internal experiences, treating people with kindness because our kids are watching, and we model what we want our kids to be internalizing.
Another good segue. Understanding risk and dysfunction is how to address needs is critical. That said, what do we know about the factors and circumstances that foster resiliency? This is in capital letters and underlined. What is the infrastructure? What are the indicators for increasing health? Is it just economic? Or are there other factors that if we had more of that, whatever that is, it would create better soil ecosystems for thriving? Don't all raise your hands at once.
Question, all right. Talk about
resilience for a long time. And I'm trying to think of what is the most important thing. Yes, there is a huge piece of economic resources that contribute to a community's resilience. That's a fact. That said, a rising tide raises all ships. So I do think of we know the science of resilience says when you have a more resilient community, you're going to have more resilient individuals. And an individual doesn't even have to be that motivated. They're just going to be able to do this, to be more resilient, because they're going to be in relationship with people who are teaching the skills, modeling the skills, and rewarding them for the skills when they use those skills. So I think if we're thinking about a resilient community, yes, we need resources, and all members of the community need access to those resources. And so sometimes that means they need to learn the skills of navigating and negotiating for those resources. That's an important piece for individuals. But when we think about the community at large, yeah, resources, but our community also needs to be engaging or I keep coming back to modeling. Really modeling what are the values of that community, that we show up for each other, that we work together to problem solve, we collaborate, that we take care of all the members of the community, including the most marginalized of those members, and that we look to address and change, dismantle the systems that aren't supporting all the members of our community. So I would just land on, if we want more resilient kids and individuals, we need more resilient community.
I will add on that one thing that comes to mind for me. I know we talk a lot about mental health, and you're absolutely right. You can't learn when you're not feeling safe. As a school board member, though, I will always point out the importance of academic, or the academic skills, having academic skills, and making sure that you have opportunities and ownership of your learning. So efficacy in your efforts, and making sure that students have something that they feel that they can do well. It doesn't all have to be academics, but something that they can succeed in and have as their own is really important. So fostering that. I know on that Almoral side, what we've been really trying to do is, we have our center model. I'm looking at Rebecca because she's also on the school board. Dr. Berlin over here is also on the school board, and Miss Dooley is as well on the Charlottesville side. So I'm not undermining the mental health at all. I just want to bring up as another point is just making sure that our students are successful, because it builds resiliency when then they later in life might have tough choices or tough things that they need to do. If they have the skills and the foundational skills they need to be successful, or something that they can claim and know, I am good at this. Even if something else is going wrong in my life, I am good at this. I see that echoed in foster care plans all the time. I mean, just the way you can turn actually a child's life around, have even one thing. I'm really good at soccer. I'm on my soccer team. I'm going to try out for this team. I'm looking forward to doing that in the future. That can make all the difference. So that's one way that we're trying to build resiliency on a division level, is just giving more opportunities for children to claim success, feel like what they do matters, and then continue to have hope and work towards other things when they might have difficulties in other areas of their lives, because some of it is outside of their control. Their housing situation is outside of their control. Their parents are outside of their control if they're from a rough family situation. So just, fostering something they can do well.
I wholeheartedly agree with that, and celebrating the accomplishments of our kids, celebrating those accomplishments, the things that they do well, and giving them that positive messaging over and over and over again cannot be underestimated. They need to feel like they're supported, they need to feel encouraged, and they need to have their success promoted widely, shouted from the rooftops. They're doing wonderful things despite all the challenges they face. We see it every day in the clubs, and we encourage our staff to make that a priority. Celebrate, celebrate. All right.
Alicia, I'll add one piece,
Okay.
I'm sorry. just thinking about, I don't know that I really answered the question, I just use the word resilience a lot. If you want to know about the factors of resilience, what are the things that we are looking for when we're thinking about resiliency? It's things like, do kids have structure, consequences, strong parent-child relationships, but also lots and lots of relationships in their lives? Do they have a positive self-identity? Do they have a sense of belonging or power or control, area where they feel like, if I'm not there, I'm going to be missed. People are going to want to know, where were you? Right? Do they feel that sense of belonging and safety? It kind of brings it back to what we were talking about. One of the factors of resilience is safety. For adults, I would add a few things like financial wellness and physical wellness, health. But we know that when kids have access to these factors of resiliency, they're going to do okay, even if they've experienced significant adversity.
On that thread, continuing that thread, and this is about parents, so we're going to go back to that. How can we, as a community, help our caregivers get the mental health support that they need? What barriers are keeping adults from accessing mental health care, and how can we, as a community, help remove those barriers?
I was just going to say that's a great question. And I'm hoping that many of you in the audience have hopefully answers for that, because I can tell you right now, specific to mental health, if we're talking about accessing mental health services for adults, there is a dearth of service providers and availability in this community. Many therapists don't even take insurance. They don't need to. There's enough people that can pay out of pocket that will claim all the spaces. And on the foster care side, where we often provide free services for parents. We know they need them. We provide them through Region 10 and other services, which I'm sure you'll be able to talk to. There are waiting lists months long. So to some extent, I'm just going to say on longer term, there needs to be support for people entering the mental health field. It's very hard, especially hard if you're doing social work or working with populations that are more difficult. So we need to support those workers a lot, and then there needs to be more money invested into our mental health care structure, both in schools and in the community, because there is just not enough right now.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. I was going to add,
Yes.
In the world of adult services, we're so under-resourced, and we're experiencing a workforce crisis, truly. And a significant piece of that is around, we can't in community mental health, we're not paying the wages that would keep good seasoned clinicians. So we don't have enough clinicians, which means we have a really long wait list. And access to the services are really challenging. I will say one of the ways we've tried to do some problem solving around that at Region 10 is in the past year, we have started we're feeling like it's pretty robust internship program. So we are trying to develop our own workforce, since we cannot bring on and hire clinicians at the rate that we need to and keep them. It's hard to keep clinicians when they have low salaries and really acute caseloads. That's a recipe for burnout. So we lose clinicians, but we're really trying to bring clinicians in at an intern level now and give them really robust training. And we have had success within keeping them after they graduate. They take jobs with us because we've tried to really bring them into a resilient family of employees. And so that's one way we're trying to solve it. It doesn't. It's not enough. I could be supervising 100 interns right now, and we would still have need in the community. So I agree, in community mental health, there's not enough money.
So one of the things that we experience when we're working with families, parents, we serve parents or families that our clinicians are, when we're working with the kids. Some of it is really helping families or parents identify or recognize that they might need to work with an outside clinician. We also experience that once we help a parent or caretaker be willing to work with an outside clinician, that we then counter that there's nobody available, that there's nobody to accept insurance, so then there's a financial or major systems issue. We also have some staffing capacity issues that we don't have enough mental health. I'm super excited about the mental health support we have, don't get me wrong, but we don't have enough to serve all of our families who might need mental health support. But there's a resource issue going on. And so we're always going to butt up against that. And just reminding everybody, right, there's a continuum of mental wellness all the way, or mental health all the way from mental wellness to mental illness. And everybody is on a journey about where they are on that gap or that continuum, and recognizing, right, like I might not recognize where I am or really be struggling. And that takes time. And so on top of the resource gap where we are, just because I recognize that I might need help doesn't mean that it's available in our community, even though I will say we are a resource-rich community, even though it doesn't feel like we are right now. City Schools also has, in partnership with something called Care Solace, and so we can put referrals in. It is not a clinical resource, but it does match with clinical resources, and so we have been lucky that they offer matching with telehealth services, and that has really helped us this year because they have telehealth services that are not locally based, and so we have been able to connect with providers that are not local, and so that has helped us connect some adults to get services more quickly, but the wait lists have been a major issue for us.
I'd like to add one point on, just because one of the things that I struggle with when we're having conversations about struggling children and struggling families is that it's really easy from an outside perspective to look at those parents and think, you're not doing a good job, you're not making the right decisions. It's actually something I experienced in my childhood, because when my parents were struggling, they weren't making great. If they had made every decision correctly, I'm sure we would have been out of poverty much sooner, but they're not capable of making every decision correctly, because when you're highly stressed, when you don't know where you're going to pay for your meal, your food for the week, when you don't have money for your groceries, and you're wondering, if I write a bad check today, will it not get cashed till Monday and I can feed my children? You're not making those higher level decisions about, and let me make sure that my children are not watching TV and aren't doing screen time and I'm connecting with them and talking. You're just not doing it. And so if I'm looking at this, one thing I would want you to take away is that we know there's not enough services, but there's a lot of us, and there's a lot of people that care, and having a kind, compassionate eye towards those who are struggling and continuing to reach out and offer them services and help and not judgment can go a long way. Because there are services out there. They're not all mental health services, but there are a lot of services. There's a lot of organizations. We are community rich in nonprofits and people trying to do good things. So continuing to connect those parents to those resources, even if we're not going to get them, into a therapist next week, is helpful. And I hope that we can continue to do that work.
Thank you. Thank you. So we really did do a pretty good job of getting through questions. There are 4 that we didn't get to. So those will be shared with the panelists, and we'll get the answers back out to you. Okay, so thank you for all those wonderful questions. Would you please join me in thanking our panelists? And now to close the program, I'm going to welcome Tamara Oberson-Diaz to, and here she is.
So on behalf of the steering committee, the program committee, the life committee, I want to thank Alicia for her fabulous moderation, facilitation, for being a great human. Alicia's one of the first women that I met when I learned about Women United, so I'm a fan of hers and anything she does. And so thank you. You do. Like life, planning a Women United event is also like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, so thank you. Got it. And also, our panelists are getting chocolate. Because being on a panel is also like a box of chocolates. You never know which questions you're gonna get. Thank you, Alicia. So I'm Tamara Dias. I have the wonderful pleasure of serving as the Women United chair of the membership committee. I've been a member of Women United for 6 years. And I'm partial because I'm a former educator, I'm a former classroom teacher in both Charlottesville City, Albemarle County, as well as local independent schools, former school administrator, and currently serve as the executive director of the African American Teaching Fellows. So I've had a little bit of experience in education and working with kids and partnering in some way, formally or informally, with everyone who's up here, whether through supporting our students or just making sure kids have what they need to be successful. And today we've heard some really great points. We've heard that our kids are facing new challenges that some of us may have never experienced in our own childhood, that some of us may not know how to respond to. We've heard that as the mental and emotional needs of our children increase, that it's gonna take more than just one organization, more than just one person. It's gonna take the collective work of all of our community partnering together in multiple ways to drive change forward. And ultimately, we've realized that the resources are here. It's just a matter of ensuring that kids have the proper resources. So again, thank you to our panelists for sharing your insight and your wisdom. We're so grateful that you joined us today. Raise your hand if you heard something today that impacted you or resonated with you. Fantastic. So your homework is to go out and tell someone. Don't keep that to yourself. Take what you've learned today and share what you learned. Say, I didn't know that we had these mental health resources. Though I may not have a child or a grandchild, you have a neighbor that does. Who can you share this with that may need to be connected with a panelist that you heard up here? It's not just taking in the knowledge, it's applying it once you leave here and using that to further impact the people in this community. So as a leader, I like to ask the question, now what? We've had this great event, we probably feel fuzzy inside, we probably feel like we want to do something. Now what? What is our next step once we leave here? The first is that if you're not a member, join, become a Women United member. And I say that because this is not the first time many of us have heard about the needs in our community, but it may be the first time that we're called to do something about it and change something, or join an organization of women who are passionate about leveraging funds to impact nonprofits that serve children and women in this community. Being a member of Women United allows you to be a part of that change. Past recipients of our grants include the YMCA Early Learning Center, the free book bus that, when we know literacy, especially post-pandemic, is a huge need for children in this community. And most recently, City of Promise, which is centered right in our West Haven housing community, supporting children and adults. And so if you want to be a part of that, if that's inspiring to you, I invite you to join. Membership forms are just outside at the table where you picked up your name tags. Now, if you are a member, you are not off the hook. There is homework for you because there is someone in your network, in your community, that you could have brought with you today to hear about this, to be impacted in the same way that you were. So if you're thinking, I'm a member, I'm good, she's not talking to me, I'm absolutely talking to you, because we need your people. We need your network in Women United. You have a cousin, sister, aunt, niece, next door neighbor, co-worker who also believes in the work of supporting nonprofits that impact women and children. Invite them, grab a form, fill it out for them, email them the link to join so that they can also be a part of the action we're trying to take as an organization. We all know the quote that knowledge is power. I prefer to say knowledge applied is power. It means nothing if all you do is take in knowledge, but you don't take action to make change. And so it's up to each of us to decide what that action looks like for us. On behalf of Women United, thank you so much for joining us today, and we hope you enjoy the rest of your week.